Here's stomach cramps.
Good morning. I'd like to
Not
call the Door
breathing
County
out.
Board of Supervisors meeting to order on Tuesday, April 16th at 9 a.m. Would you please join me for...
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Let's see if this puppy worked. That's snappy. Snappy better.
Much better.
Nothing.
There we go.
It's not working here.
Try flipping it around. I had mine in upside down initially.
Ah,
There we go. We have 21 present, no absent.
New member.
Remember?
they didn't say positive or negative.
Item 4, review and revise reaffirmed rules of order and duties of committees, Rule 41 minutes. Grant?
Yes. One of the requests that was made, and I forget from whom it emanated, but was to create a rule of order that dealt with minutes. That is on page 12 of your packet. It pretty much mirrors the statutes and Robert's Rules of Order. And in essence, what it does is indicates that the minutes are the record of the proceedings of the county board and its subunits, and talks about what minutes should contain, which is mainly a record of what was done at the meeting, not necessarily what was said by members of the county board, any of its subunits, or members of the public. And goes on to state that a verbatim record is neither necessary nor advisable. So that is what was drafted. That's what was sent forward from the administrative committee. I can answer any questions if anybody has any, but it seems relatively simple and straightforward, at least to my eyes. Probably because I drafted it.
Grant, do you want to motion that now, or do you want it part of the rules later?
I think we probably should motion it now, and then it would become part.
I'll make a motion to reaffirm the rules of orders.
I will second that, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions or comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 5, presentation of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Correspondence. You have in here your unassigned fund balance sheet, letter received from Sophie Fire, letter received from 4982 from Brandon Schaff. Also on your desk today were a number of correspondence items that everybody should receive. Does anybody have any correspondence they'd like to add? Linda?
I have a question on the unassigned fund balance. Could you please refresh my memory on what the $300,000 was, the transfer from unassigned fund balance? All of the other ones are itemized out for purpose, and that $300,000, I forgot what that was. Does anybody know?
You're catching me off guard, Al. If you give me a minute, I can get you an answer.
Or later,
Yeah, I'll get that answer for you.
and maybe make a note for that for next time around.
Sure, I can do that.
Anybody else on correspondence? Public comment. We'll now make available public comment. We have a maximum of 30 minutes. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes. Would anybody like to speak? Morning.
Good morning, Robert Sayers, Forestville. During the last December's Forestville Town Hall meeting, Door County officials dropped the bomb on the public gathered there, announcing not a winter drawdown, not a one-year drawdown, but a 2-year drawdown, which was not even one of the options in the Mill Pond report. 2 weeks earlier, December 5th, there was a joint Facilities and Park and Land Conservation Committee meeting where this recommendation was made based on several so-called stakeholders meeting. The word stakeholder here is an interesting new interpretation of the definition, as none of the biggest stakeholders were present. I quote here from the minutes of that meeting. Coldhurst explained the final two options that the stakeholder group settled on, including 1, a full year drawdown, and 2, remove the dam, eliminate the mill pond, and return Anapi River to an uninterrupted stream. Unquote. So the so-called stakeholders group decided to completely ignore the outcome of the taxpayers paid public survey as published in the mill pond report, where dam removal was listed as the strongest disagreed option by the public. Quoted from the next paragraph, same meeting, Aaron Hansen outlined the soil and water recommendation to incorporate an extended drawdown for 2 winters and 2 summers. This proposal would begin fall of 2019 and refill in 21. So Coldhurst's final 2 options were not final. Next paragraph quoted, Dan Ostedt made a motion, seconded by Ken Fisher, approving the soil and water recommendation to implement the 2-year drawdown and refill in 21. Dan Ostedt questioned whether the county board could reverse the decision to refill in the future. Grant Thomas responded yes. Discussion followed. Laura Jorgensen, Forestville, expressed concern of leaving the drawdown open-ended and questioned how monitoring would work. Tom Moronic, DNR, expressed his concerns of leaving the drawdown open-ended, as DNR would not likely offer assistance without a defined refill day. Joe Husek, Forestville, and member of the so-called stakeholder committee, stated that the survey completed as part of the management plan report overwhelmingly stated that people did not want the dam removed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Door County ethics and core values recheck number 2, and our tax dollars at work in the hands of some, not all, of our taxpayer-paid trusted public servants. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Kyle Littke, the Superintendent of Sebastopol School District. I'd like to address the board on the school resource officers topic. This is my 2nd year at Sebastopol School District, and I just want to let you know I've worked in 5 different counties serving kids, and the services of the Door County Sheriff's Department and the emergency services is the best I've experienced in the different counties I've been in. In regards to the school resource officers, our school board is fully in support of having a school resource officer in our building full-time. They're financially ready to make the commitment to support that as well. The administrative team wants that, and so does the staff. It's going to build positive relationships between the students and the officers, and it's only going to be preventative and informational and educational for our students, and only positive things are going to come about because of this arrangement, and I'm so happy to see this coming forward to you today, and I'm fully expecting it to pass because I can't see how it can have a downside. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Tina Van Meer. I'm the superintendent for Gibraltar Area Schools. I'll try to stay brief because Patty's coming up behind me and she has some important things to say as well. I too am fully in support of a school resource officer. Gibraltar is a wonderful community and we have a very supportive parents, community members, and our staff and students are phenomenal. I have to tell you, I have been at Gibraltar for 7 years, and when I first came here, it looked a lot different when it came to interacting with police officers and with our fire department and other safety services. We just really didn't have a relationship. I was quite shocked to find out that my police officers didn't know the layout of our building. And if we had had an emergency, I would be worried about them being able to respond in a way to save lives. And that's really important. Since that time, we have built a collaborative relationship with all of our safety services throughout the county. We have a strong relationship with them, but not only that, we have a strong relationship as Door County schools. And being able to work all together has made our schools safer for our kids, for our families, for our community. But more important, the reason the school resource officer is so valuable to us is because it's a way of bringing a mentor relationship into our school environment. To have a police officer mentoring our young kids and our high school kids as well, and building that relationship from day one will create a new environment in our schools. It's not only about safety, it's about building those important relationships for our youth. And it has been a tremendously positive experience, and I'll leave you with one story. I had a police officer who just showed up at our school, and during bus time, he was walking with students and talking to them, and I happened to be walking by when he had this little young man, and he was holding his hand, and they were walking to the bus, and the young man looked up at him and he said, "I want to be you when I grow up. I want to be a police officer." And he said to him, "You can be whatever you want to be." And I just think it's just so invaluable. It's hard to put in words. But I thank you for allowing me to speak to you today, and I hope that you will support this new initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patty Vickman. I'm the superintendent at Southern Door. I'm actually a native of Door County and have been gone for a while and came back. So like many of you, when I went to school here in Door County, things were very different than what they are today. Our students and our staff and our families and our community are dealing with some issues, whether it's social media, AODA issues, or even the threat of school violence, like we heard on the news just this morning in the Fox cities, that we've not had to deal with before. I've had a long history in my career of working with school resource officers, and they have been invaluable. Just creating the relationships like Tina and Kyle talked about, but also being there to address a lot of issues and bring expertise to the school that we don't currently have, whether it's social media, whether it's dealing with families that are having separation issues, whether it's students who are in foster homes and need support. All kinds of things come to the forefront. We have been working collaboratively with emergency services, with the other school districts, and with the sheriff's department, so that we have a continuum of services to be able to support our schools safety-wise with our students. Many of you may be aware that the Department of Justice was formed last year, formed an Office of School Safety. We all had to submit safety plans. One of the questions in the safety plan is, do you have a school resource officer? So that is valued at the state level. Unfortunately, Sevastopol, Southern Door, and Gibraltar had to answer no. Sturgeon Bay was able to answer yes, because they do have a school resource officer. Our school board is entirely in support of this, as are our administrative team and our staff members. Southern Door, that whole, almost half of Door County is a large area, and when we had to estimate the time that it would take for emergency personnel to come to Southern Door, God forbid, should a tragedy occur, it's over 12 minutes. We know from the research that a lot of things happen in the first 5 to 7 minutes, so having someone there to be able to support us is crucial. As one of my board members put it in our discussion, this is an investment that we are making. I would rather take a whole bunch of questions from our citizens regarding why I made this investment than, if a tragedy were to occur, to answer one question about why we did not. So I thank you for all of your support. These are our children. They're your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, your neighbors' kids, and eventually one day they are going to be citizens in our community. And I know as a county board, you have lots of competing interests. So do we as a Board of Education. But I thank you for everything that you do so that our community can continue to thrive, from the littlest citizen up to the one who's the most senior experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If anybody wants to speak on transportation, now would be the time to have any transportation comments.
Hello.
Morning.
You probably know who I am. I'm Thomas, and I've been on the news and I've been on the radio a couple times. First of all, I've only been given 3 minutes, is something that's so important to me. I think it's really unfair. I'm a taxpayer, and so are they. And I'm a voter, so are they. And this is something that can't be taken away. I have over 700 signatures in my petition I have going to keep door-to-door going. And I will go door-to-door in Sturgeon Bay or anywhere else if I have to keep it going. Door-to-door is not a luxury, but it's something that's needed. There are people who can't get to their jobs. There are people who are severely handicapped, a lot more than me, who can't walk, who are in the Sunshine House or somewhere else. And that's their only way of getting around. And they might not have a relative who has a van to support the equipment they need to get around. And to be housebound is like to be put in prison. And me personally, I refuse to be put in prison. And I will be moving to Sturgeon Bay shortly, but that's neither here nor there, because my parents live in Egg Harbor, and to go to Sturgeon Bay to Egg Harbor, one trip from regular taxi, would be over $50. I'm on Social Security. I don't have $50 just to pay for a cab. Door to door, round trip is $20. And I do a lot of volunteer work at Boys and Girls Club. I do a lot of work in, just around Sturgeon Bay. And I think there's other areas that you could really look at and mess with. And I think this is something that's not not a luxury, like I said, but it's something it's needed, not only for the actual person itself, but for the families to have a peace of mind. Oh yeah, door to door is going to take them. Yeah, door to door will pick them up. And just take that away, I think is abuse of power. And I think that something else should be looked at. I think something else should be considered, but door to door isn't one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you. Supervisor's response. Minutes of the March 26, 2019 regular meeting.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any changes, additions, deletions, comments, remarks, grammatical errors? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Pending business and updates. We are going to move down to special report presentation on Door County Transportation Program with Joe Kresbach and Ken Paddock.
So Joe, you want to come on up? So this kind of want to go through where we, I guess, ended last month, as far as an update of where we are today. So you can see on the screen, again, those were the options that we had presented. Obviously, if you look at the options, there's the suggested where we keep the service kind of as it is, and you can see the projected cost, I guess, in that middle line where we say additional revenue. And then you can also see the option of if we would, I guess, in essence, remove door-to-door, but we still maintain the ADRC bus. And then the other option we presented was scaling it back to about 200 hours a week. Since that meeting, obviously from the last meeting, there's individuals that said that they had ideas or comments or suggestions to try to, I guess, make changes or try to bring different things to the table. We did have that meeting. Well, we had multiple meetings, one with a consultant to ask questions that you had asked in terms of certain things that we could tweak. We also had meetings with various stakeholders, again, in terms of options that we could pursue. And again, we tried to just brainstorm just to make sure we did not miss anything. The long story short is that obviously we can make some tweaks. We can look at some of the fees in terms of the structure. We're researching that. Obviously, there's some ways within the system itself we could look at some efficiencies in terms of how we're providing the service. But if you're looking at it in terms of the service itself, it's more The best way to describe it is we're buying a block of time for the taxis to be in service. Within that block of time, we can make adjustments to make it more efficient and actually possibly move more people. But in essence, we're still buying that block of time for the same dollars. So when it comes down to it, why there were some nice ideas that we think we can work towards and move, really we're still at the same position. In other words, we didn't, I guess, come up with anything new that would change our position in terms of what we think are viable options. The only thing that I would say that was updated is that the one thing we did add from the last meeting to this one is that even with, if we're going to even maintain the system at reduced hours, I guess from our standpoint, we still think it's important to have at least a part-time transportation manager that can look at those efficiencies. So we actually built that into the cost. So I think at the last meeting, we were somewhere around the $20,000 mark, but now you'll see that on that last option, you'll actually say it shows $39,471. The one thing that we did, let's be honest, we did get lots of comments and we included them on your desk, but also from calls and also from our session in terms of brainstorming. Obviously, there is a preference of trying to maintain the system countywide and not scaling it back, I guess, for that third option of terms of the number of hours. The hard thing that we have is if we scale it back, it truly is logistically not feasible for us to maintain doing it for the entire county. Because once we scale back those hours and then if we maintain it still at countywide, our numbers would reduce significantly in terms of the rides that we provide. So in essence, you're actually adding more stress to the system overall. So again, I still think those are the three options that we are looking at. In terms of making a decision today, we're not asking for that. We're actually making a presentation to the city council. We were scheduled to do that earlier, but with the elections, it makes sense to make that presentation to the new city council. And we'll be asking for what type of support they might be able to provide. So what we're hoping to do is between going to the city council, and again, we took some time to refine everything we got in terms of comments. But really right now, we're just trying to give you an update and ask if you have any initial or new feedback, but we'll bring this back in May as far as a final recommendation. As an FYI, if we do not scale back the service, in other words, if we maintain it the way it is, we do not have to conduct a public hearing. But if we do scale it back, then we do. So that's one of the things we're trying to work with this timeline in terms of going out for a bid for the service itself. So I don't know if I missed anything, Joe, but do you want to add?
No, you covered everything that we had talked about. And again, I think the timing is probably the crucial issue. If we're going to change the system, we do have to do a public hearing that needs to have a 30-day notice and a couple of publications. But other than that, I would say no new information unless you have questions.
Susan?
Two questions. The public hearing is before the Human Services Board or before this board?
I would suggest we do it for this board.
Okay. And my second one is, when you say up there that 39,000 includes the half-day manager?
Halftime.
Half-time manager?
Correct.
Okay. Does the 163 also include it?
That includes a full-time manager is built
full-time
into
manager.
that. Or, yeah. I'm not sure that the rate that we use would be substantial to hire a full-time manager, but close.
Anybody else? Linda?
So if it's going to be placed on the May agenda for action, and the board decides that we want reduced hours, then there would be a public hearing and just delay it that much longer?
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. Unless we had a direction at this point, we still need to give a 30-day notice, and that 30-day notice would have to provide to the public what the plan was. So,
Do we have the option of just going ahead and having a public hearing, whether we change it or not?
I suppose you could do that, yeah. It's required by DOT if we make a change in the overall structure of our system that we provide a public hearing to let individuals know what that suggested change is so that they can offer you feedback before you make a decision.
Wouldn't we want to do that? I mean, wouldn't we want to have a public hearing on this is what it's going to cost if we do the status quo, this is what it's going to cost if we reduce hours, get the public input on reduction in hours or whatever it may be?
From my perspective, we've already done that. We did that last month. We're doing that today. We made people aware with a public service announcement so that they knew we were talking about it last month. So I think until we have a final recommendation and where you guys would like us to take it, I think until then, it's not necessary to do another one, but that's my opinion.
David? So in the direction of where Linda was going, what it is, procedurally speaking, we have to officially make a decision of which way we're looking at going in order to actually have the public hearing that they're requiring us to have, right? We can't have a general public hearing and then make that decision.
Correct. I think we need to be able to, I would say at this point, and Ken can correct me if I'm wrong, that we need a direction to give you, here's our recommendation, this is what we're going to do, and that would be where we need to have the public hearing, when we know. And if the direction from the board came back to say, leave it as it is in the first column, and we're not going to reduce hours, we're going to run the system as it currently is, then there is not even a need for a public hearing.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is the other entities, the DOT, they would see it as we need to make that decision and then have the public hearing. So even having a public hearing independently wouldn't count due to their
That's correct.
procedural requirement.
That's correct.
Jenny?
As far as the $163,000, $600, if that was going to be allocated, I'm assuming it comes from the Human Services budget. And if it did, what is it, where would it be coming from? What would we be losing to be spending that?
So again, I guess in my mind, I would actually say it would not come from the Human Services budget. I mean, it could.
We had a worry there for a while.
Well, let me take that back.
That was a sigh.
No, I mean, to be honest, one of the things we're working on right now is we're trying to, I guess, extract the transportation out of Human Services in general. This is not a good location for it. Although they provide services to individuals in need, it is a transportation system and it applies beyond that. So ultimately, what we're hoping to do is pull out the transportation program, and whatever manager we'd have would actually would report to myself, but also we'd set up what we're looking at doing is like a transportation committee. So that way there's some specific oversight over that, and they're actually just dedicated to transportation, because it is complicated. In terms of the funding itself, yeah, that's the question would be, yes, if we're going to maintain it, we're going to do that $163,000, where do we find those funds? And again, there's multiple options that we have discussed, but it'd have to come throughout the organization. We have to look at some of those priorities and find out where we want to see if we can extract those dollars. And obviously, the one thing that's been brought up multiple times is maybe looking at a referendum for that, and whether or not we pursue that as another option going forward. But again, even with the referendum, I think we need to go into making a decision now, simply because we can't get the referendum passed in time, that we are committing ourselves to whatever decision we make, because if the referendum would fail, we'd still then have to, in essence, find the money. So I think the best thing we can do right now is move forward with making a selection, and then if we would pursue a referendum or other alternative, that would have to be something that we pursue at a later time. So, right, yes. I would say not all from Human Services, but we'd have to find those funds from somewhere, correct?
Thank you.
Ellen?
So just for clarification, the reason we need to do this is the new contract needs to be written, and that contract then runs for 3 years, right? No? Or we can write a shorter one?
Yeah, the contract itself the last contract was a 2-year contract with 3 additional option years. Okay. We can write the RFP for the bid however we would like. My belief is that we need to have a longer-term plan, or we won't get bids. There's a large capital expense that goes into running this type of an operation. The current vendor has 8 vehicles. Those vehicles were put in play at the beginning of our contract 5 years ago. Most of them need replacement at this point. And so I think if we only made a 1-year commitment or a 2-year commitment, we might have trouble getting a vendor to bid on it.
Okay. So in that time period, you've talked about a manager, part-time or full-time. So it sounds like there's some kind of forward movement, a little bit anyway, trying to maybe solve this problem. How much time do you think how much time do you think you would need to really take a look at this and bring in maybe some other players or look at some of the other options that we have, like a referenda, a manager, et cetera?
Well, let me clarify. I think what we have before you is, I guess, of the three options, we just got to pick one of those and then figure out how to fund it. The fact that if we're going to pursue one, the manager, I think, would help us in terms of the operations of the system itself. But I think the decisions between those three are pretty clear in terms of moving forward. So I'm a little bit confused on what you're asking.
Well, I guess I'm trying to look forward a little bit as to if we're going to try to solve this problem. It's more than just, I guess my vote on one of these options has to do also with looking forward into, I guess, the timeline, looking forward as far as the types of options that may be out there on a local level.
My take on that is, and again, feel free to jump in, Ken. My take on that is we have to make a decision just based on where we're at in the contract and the fact that we need to move forward. We need to make that decision first. Then we need to bring the manager in. And then from there, we start creating additional efficiencies within the system. So we try to figure out how to use the ADRC bus in a different manner, what kind of routes we need to run, where we need to run them, can we do connectors? That would be the manager's role in all of this. And so basically what I would be kind of thinking is that the commitment would have to come first, and we would have to keep working towards creating those efficiencies and building and redesigning the system to meet needs.
Okay.
But that would come after.
Thank you.
I think just the one thing, just to clarify this one more time too, is again, if we go out for again, I'd still probably concur with Joe in terms of a 3-year contract. We can go shorter, but then they're just going to increase their capital expense and the bid's going to come in higher. So our numbers will be off. So I think the 3 years is our best projection on what we think they're going to need as far as their capital investment. But in terms of, again, moving forward, once we do that 3-year bid, in essence, you're buying that block of time, and that's kind of set. So again, if we're buying the 440 hours, you're buying that block of time. That doesn't change. Your cost with the vendor doesn't change. You can make the efficiency changes in terms of within those hours, right? You can adjust them and you can try to get more efficient, but our cost, bottom line, does not change. So I guess I just want to clarify that, because we can make, again, that's one of the things that people are talking about, that we can get more efficient. If we get more efficient, we'll save money. No, we really don't, because we're actually contracted to buy that block of time at that cost. So we can get more efficient, move more people, or provide more rides, or do that type of thing, but the block of time that we're buying still remains that cost.
Bob?
Does the cost or the expense of hiring a manager, is that figured into these numbers at all yet?
Yes, in both scenarios. And the first one is full-time, and then the third one is a part-time.
Thank you.
David?
Using the example that was given during public comment, at $27 an hour, if I remember correct, was one of the numbers given last month. Why don't we have a variation of just a voucher program? Economically, wouldn't that make more sense to use the existing carriers within the county rather than, I mean, where am I missing the logic to this? Because effectively, it's costing us more to do the same job you already described here.
Well, we haven't
just because he's paying less, and I understand, I don't have a problem with that, but the cost of the service for us to provide the exact same service is basically the same or a little bit more.
I don't know that we've figured that out, because I don't know the 47,000 rides, 46,000 rides, or 42.6. I don't know how we would know what the full price of those rides is if we were paying half, kind of what DoorTrain has a system where they can help people with half of the cost of a regular cab. We've never gone through and looked at those 42,000 rides to figure out how they move and what the expense is. I wasn't involved in the design of this or the setup of this, but I think what it does for us is you make a decision on the front end, kind of what Ken said. Our cost is going to be our cost once we decide to go in. If we're doing it based on ridership, then I'm not sure how we control the cost. We're going to move everybody that wants to take a ride on a half-price voucher. Will we go from 42,000 to 60,000 rides? Will there be more people moving throughout the county? We can't control that. When we buy it by the hour, we know what we're paying for. We know we're going to run the service from this time to this time each day with this many cabs on the road each hour, and then we know what that cost will be. I don't know if it would be cheaper to do it in a different manner. I haven't tried to figure that out. I would be concerned, again, about the control of that and where is the bottom line, because now I don't control that. I say anybody who wants to ride can ride for half price, and we're going to subsidize that. Again, I'm not sure how that would work on the DOT side either with 5311 funding. But that being said, I don't know where you put the stop then or how you contain that.
True, but by the same token, the use of the service has gone up every year. So
correct.
Obviously, even if we have a contract, it's so much an hour. If we go from 40,000 to 60,000, we're still going to pay more, right?
No, we're still buying just by the hour. And so what's happened is we've actually leveled off over the last couple of years in terms of ridership because we've gotten to our capacity. In fact, some of the factors that are playing into this is that we can't meet demands even with the number of cabs we have on the road right now. And so, but we're not paying for additional hours. So what we did, and again, I think this is a good thing, we've created efficiencies between 2017 and 2018. We reduced 76 hours a week, and we're still moving about the same number of people. So more people are sharing rides. The taxi system is working more in the way that we designed it. And again, I think we can keep creating those efficiencies. But in terms of what we're buying, we have that set with the vendor in the contract. He knows at the beginning of the year how many hours per year we're going to buy. We determine how many days, what hours during the day, how many vehicles are on the road at any given time. So we control that through the contract process, as opposed to, and again, that ridership. Right.
So you do, to some degree, we are limiting, because we've hit our maxed out, there are some individuals unable to take advantage of the service simply because it's maxed out.
And those individuals are using Sunshine House for rides or using private taxis for rides. And people have, I would say, figured out how to work around the system. So if I'm calling today and I need a ride at 11:30 and they tell me, sorry, we don't have a cab available until 12, now I need to call somebody else to get my ride. So, I mean, again, I think our regular riders are starting to figure out how to use that and prepare and plan ahead and some of that kind of stuff.
A separate question, different question. Since this is a government-sponsored, subsidized activity, do we have any input on the drivers, the actions, the way they act and so forth? I've been on the road, especially this last winter, with several of the door-to-door vehicles that I would not allow anybody to ride in if they acted that way with me, including last week.
So we have a contract with a vendor, and when we have concerns that are brought to us by the public, we have a response to that. We get to the vendor and have them address those issues. But we don't hire the vendors, and we don't directly supervise them.
So it is just simply
or the drivers.
A typical way of communicating concerns to.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Susan?
I'm going to throw out a proposal. I mean, this is, I guess, what I see in terms of this discussion, and people can react or whatever. I think it's appropriate to use referendum because essentially what we're talking about here is we have a pie of a certain size, that's our levy limit, and we're asking, if we go with the first column, we're asking to reprioritize a little bit to make those numbers work for this. So it's certainly appropriate to ask the people. I realize we don't get to do that in time to make this decision, so my proposal is we make this work for a reason, you know, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years if we have to. We make it work, you find the money. And during that time, we go to referendum and we ask the people, is this what you want? Is this a priority for you? Because if it is, and it certainly, the responses I've gotten from the public suggest that it's a priority for a lot of people, then we know going forward. But I personally don't want to see this go away, and I think we look for the money. That's my personal opinion.
John?
I would agree with Susan Kohout on that. That was the same thought process I was trying to come up with, but she beat me to it, and I thank her for that. I think this is an invaluable service to our people in our community. They need it. They've expressed it. I would like to see the same thing. Let's try to find the money and afford it for another contract term, and then go to referendum and let the people decide how they want to fund it at a later time, but that would give us the time to fund that. So if she would make that in the form of a motion, I would second that.
I would make that, except, is that appropriate for now, for us to have a motion?
It's not.
No, I think I'm with you on the train of thought, but I'd still like to, again, at least have an opportunity to talk with the city to see if there is any potential interest in them participating, but that would be something that we would actually do at the next meeting.
Can I add one more thing to mine?
Yes.
I know that you tried to beat the bushes to find money elsewhere, and you went places and nobody offered. I'd like us to ask. I'd like us to send a more formal ask to some of the organizations in this community that have a lot of people using it to get to them. And maybe they turn us down, but I don't think we wait for them to offer. We say, this is important, blah, blah, blah. We'd like you to contribute. Maybe that's inappropriate for government to do too, but I personally think we ought to do it.
Roy? In option 3, are we keeping the service area the same, or did we reduce the service area?
In option 3, we've reduced the service area to the core or city, just outside the city zone.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Vinnie?
I don't know how much you want to keep agreeing, but I agree with both the comments. I'd like to see the program continue, and I'd like to see a referendum to help support it. I'm hoping that through the program continuing and looking for the funds, we're able to do some asks and do some fundraising, not necessarily as a government body, but in the community to help support and to show that support. It would be nice. Thank you.
Anybody else? No?
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We want to talk about that too someday.
Okay, we'll move up to the resolutions. Resolution 2019-29, recognition of Kenneth Wendt. Mr. Ostead.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-29.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Want me to read it?
Please.
Okay. Becoming a habit. Resolution 2019-29, recognition of Kenneth C. Wendt to the Door County Board of Supervisors. Whereas Kenneth Wendt of Sturgeon Bay served his country in the U.S. Army from 1954 to 1956 during the Korean conflict and returned to Sturgeon Bay with an honorable discharge. And whereas Kenneth Wendt advocated tirelessly for the veterans throughout his life as a life member of Weber Test AMVETS Post 51 in Sturgeon Bay and in many AMVET state-level leadership positions that greatly benefited his fellow veterans. And whereas Kenneth Wendt served as chairman of the Board of the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs to ensure Wisconsin veterans and their families would be and taken care of. And whereas Kenneth Wendt was recognized by the state of Wisconsin at the King Veterans Home for all his years of selfless service to veterans by having a meeting room named in his honor. And whereas Kenneth Wendt, longtime dedication to others, has improved the quality of life for countless veterans in Door County and the state of Wisconsin. Now therefore it be resolved that the Door County Board of Supervisors, on behalf of all citizens of Door County, extends our sincere gratitude and appreciation for the service and dedication of Kenneth Wendt to the people of Door County and the state of Wisconsin.
I messed up a little bit. I was going to have Scott read that, but maybe Scott, you could come up and maybe to say a word too, just because you worked with him for so long, and this is why it's here for us today, but you can give some background.
Thank you, Mr. Pavick, Chairman Leno, County Board. And I should mention that we're doing it this way without the family here because after the funeral, most of the family returned to wherever they were from outside of Door County, and Mrs. Mary Wendt is currently in Sturgeon Bay Health Services undergoing rehab, and it would have been difficult for her to get here today. So we are also going to recognized Mr. Wendt at the Armed Forces Day Breakfast in mid-May, and we'll have a big body of veterans there, hopefully, partaking in breakfast, and we can just stop for a couple of minutes, and we will do the reading again. Thank you, Mr. Alstad, for reading that. And you know, Mr. Wendt, as you may have seen in the Pulse article they did, was just a giant in the veterans community, not only for us here in Door County, but the state of Wisconsin as well. And he will be greatly missed. In fact, he's being missed more every day as the veterans realize all the things he did that we're trying to pick up on, some of the things that we didn't even know about. But what a wonderful man who dedicated his life to serving his fellow veterans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Resolution 2019-30, publication.
We voted.
We did.
We voted.
We voted.
Before.
Oh, sorry.
I thought I was the only one to do that.
Resolution 2019-30, publication of legal notice in newspapers. Grant?
Briefly, we brought this forward because of a change in law that took place in 2017 and became effective April of 2018. In brief, Chapter 985 of the statute sets out the requirements for counties publishing or posting legal notice. And in order for a county to satisfy these requirements, the newspaper must be qualified under the statutes. Recently, both the Door County Advocate and the Peninsula Pulse filed a certificate with the county clerk stating that it qualifies under the statutes. County is not required to designate a newspaper as its official newspaper. There is some question that as to whether or not the county did so in the past. We've not been able to locate anything officially where the county has done so, but there seems to be a persistent rumor. So what this resolution does is indicate quite clearly is that the county does not wish to designate and in fact repudiates any prior designation and leaves the door open to the county publishing its legal notices in any newspaper that meets the qualifications under the statutes.
Somebody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Questions or other discussion? David?
Does this open up the door, because we don't designate a newspaper, does open up the door that we need to publish to both of them in this case? A third one, a fourth one? How do we make that decision?
No, what it does, it opens up the door to any newspaper that meets the statutory qualifications, which means they're certified to publish the legal notifications. The actual decision would be left to the individual who's doing the publication. In most cases in the county, it's Jill's office or my office, and it doesn't mean that we have to publish it in both or any qualified paper. We can still just select one. So.
I'm purely looking at the cost of publications are not inexpensive anymore.
Right.
Linda?
Well, I'm looking for consistency. I actually do read all the legal notices. I might be the only one. But if it's sometimes going to be in the Pulse and sometimes going to be in the Advocate, then we don't have any consistency. So I read both subscriptions. I pay for, I know one is non-fee subscription and the other one is. So we don't have any consistency. Or will there be consistency?
Well, that is one of the things that was created by the statutory change. Now, it's we were entirely consistent up until this point with publication in one newspaper, and I think it's safe to say that the intent of the prior statutory change, and I believe there are some that are in the offing that may open the door to other newspapers, is to provide the local decision makers choice as to where they publish. So, you know, I can't say that there, depends how you look at consistency, but if we adopt this resolution, there will no longer, we will no longer be publishing in just one newspaper. But it's what the statutes allow. That's what I don't know what prompted the law change, but that's the outcome of the change in law, that there are choices now.
Well, with a Class 1 notice where you only have to publish one time, if I don't know what newspaper it's going to be in, I could possibly miss it. Now, if it's a Class 3, obviously you're publishing 3 times, and you've got a better chance of catching it somewhere. So just a thought. I have no objection to this, but I would like to see consistency.
Just to build on that thought, I think that it would be important to have consistency as well, and would tend to lean towards it being a publication that is the most accessible to all of our constituents.
John?
I got to agree with Linda. I can see some real confusion coming here, especially as my wife is one that's going to publish it. So we look in Brussels for what? For one newspaper, the publication, and in the town and the county for another one? I agree with Linda 100%. We need some consistency here. Sometimes there's people out there confused enough. We don't need to add to it.
I should note that the municipalities are not bound by the county's decision. They will, each of the towns, the city, and each of the villages will be able to make a decision as to whether or not they will open up the publications or continue as they have in the past.
Well, that's even more confusing if I've got the town of Sevastopol in one newspaper and the county of Door in the other and the city in another. It could cause some problems.
Well, there's a couple parts I'm going to, Grant and I, you have to correct me if we're not on the same page, but again, I think right now what the resolutions has given us is the ability to choose between, obviously, the publications that meet the standard. Right now, for us, there's 2 publications without, and we know what they are. So that'd be the resolution. From a policy standpoint, you could direct me to say that we're going to use one for a year and to, do that consistency. We can't enforce that on the town, but from a policy standpoint, I could say, okay, for this year, we're going to do this. I think that one of the main reasons we were prompted, and I'm not going to try to be negative, is just that with the advocates pulling back their resources and also their offices, we did confirm that they're here, but the level of service related to how much we do has been not consistent. And I think that's just a fair assessment. I'm not trying to be negative or anything like that, but it's just one of those things where it's becoming more and more difficult to actually work with individuals that can, I guess, and Joe can go back to that, but actually to get the publications done in a proper format. So again, the resolution gives us the option for both. If you're looking for us to be consistent, we could actually do from a operational standpoint to say we're going to try this one for the year just to be consistent, but again, it does not force the towns to do that. Would that be correct in how I'm saying that?
That is correct, but I would be reluctant because we haven't in the entire history of Door County used anything but one publication, and with the legal publications, they have been largely adequate. And I think we're going to dip our toes and kind of experiment with the publications that haven't done legal notices. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we're prepared today to say that we should make a wholesale switch. And if you want to leave the discretions, always rest with the county administrator to work with staff. But I would be reluctant to, in essence, designate a single publication, particularly if it's one we haven't used previously for legal publications, because it can create quite a mess. It's one thing if it's, I don't want to minimize it, if there's a screw up for a publication of a public meeting. There's another if you publish a summons and complaint and it's done incorrectly, and 3 years later you have to undo the outcome of a judgment because the publication was deemed defective. So I don't think we actually have enough information to make a decision on selecting a particular newspaper today, but we all realize that perhaps the direction we may go for purposes of consistency. But I think we also have to understand, going back to the genesis of this and the ask that was made, I think statewide of the legislators, was to give the people that publish, are responsible for publishing legal notices, the discretion to exercise their judgment and choose the correct newspaper in a given circumstance. And yes, there's going to be a degree of inconsistency, but that's what the state legislature has deemed to be allowable.
So if we pass this just simply allows us to choose either or.
Correct.
But by policy, we could say it'll be A.
Yeah, we could. And there may be a distinction between publishing notices for meetings and publishing notices that are required under the statute for state and for criminal and civil matters. So
Wait a minute. David?
Yeah, I'm completely agree with not designating a newspaper at this time. It is appropriate. We don't know how the third entity, second entity, third, fourth, fifth, whatever it is, can actually perform their duties appropriately. The other thing is, this is a note in reference to the other municipalities grant. Did that change also go to effect for the other municipalities? So is that also valid for towns, so they can make that choice as well now?
Yeah, the other municipalities are governed by the same statute.
It is the
we
same
are.
statute.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm not going to pick on the Washington Island newspaper, but the fact is, I think Joel Kitchens is forwarding legislation to allow them to be. Now, using that as an example, again, not to be critical of the Washington Island paper, I'm not going to publish legal notice of a summons and complaint I file against somebody that lives in Chicago in the Washington Island newspaper, because I think a judge is going to look sideways at me and say, that's not reasonable.
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is, I think we need to allow staff to have the discretion to decide where to publish, and trust that they're going to do it in a way that meets the legal requirements of publication, but that's just my opinion. And that's why we're doing this, is to go away from having a single newspaper and have it be somewhat open.
Dan?
Can you put this up for bid or for an RFP?
The rates are set by the state, so.
Bob?
Does this statute address having it published online, or is this strictly addressing print newspaper?
We're still living in the print paradigm. An editorial comment, the newspapers aren't ready to get that up yet.
Okay.
Kathy?
I think times have changed. It used to be that the Advocate was the only thing that was circulated that everybody got. It's not that way anymore. I think probably more people read the Post, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately, but I know the city used to designate every year at the organizational meeting the official newspaper. Now, whether that still is happening, I don't know, but that's what we did. We couldn't go to the Green Bay Press Gazette, and a lot of people in town had Green Bay Press Gazette and read those legals, but they weren't ours. So, I mean, I think the times have changed, and you don't just have one that's the qualifying. So I think probably it gets to the point of what is the price and what you're looking at, and that should be up to the department heads, I would think, that are putting a notice in.
There was a question about the price. What was your comment about the price?
At least for the legal publications that we're required to do, the state sets the rate, so
You're right.
everybody, yeah.
Vinnie?
I just would second the thought on making a selection that's most accessible to the public, which in my mind is one that is maybe more distributed and at no charge, because that would define accessibility to me, but that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Helen?
So did I understand that there's some concern that perhaps the other paper would not be able to publish them correctly? And if that is the case, how would that be explored?
On a case-by-case basis. And again, until very recently, we only had one choice in Door County. There was only one newspaper that was qualified, but, and there may be times, depending on the significance of the legal publication, that we use a belt and suspenders approach and publish it in 3 different newspapers, because really the goal of publication is to make sure that the person receives notice. So it's not unusual for us if we have, let's say, the last known address of a party in a civil case in Door County was Des Moines, Iowa, is we're required to publish in the local newspaper, but we'll also publish in the paper where they were last known to reside, so we can go to the court with clean hands and say, we did our level best to publish notice, and the party still didn't appear.
So would it be reasonable to think that possibly publishing in both papers, is that possible?
It's possible, but it's not economic in most situations. And that's why, again, goes to leaving it to the department head to make a decision on a case-by-case basis, because quite frankly, I don't think we have enough information here to make that decision to select a particular publication. And it sort of goes against what the legislature was trying to do in opening it up so that the local units of the government and staff had more than one choice.
Anybody else? Okay. If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution 2019-31, America's Farmers Grow Communities donation to the Aging and Disability Resource Center in Door County. Helen?
Well, the Human Services Board has voted to accept the aforesaid donation, and we're asking the Door County Board of Supervisors to accept the America Farmers Grow Communities donation of $2,500 for the Aging and Disability Resource Centers. This is for the Meals on Wheels program, but it would put freezers in all of the meal sites and would allow families and friends be much easier for them to pick up frozen meals for people that are homebound that qualify for Meals on Wheels. And so I'd like to thank Randy for writing the grant. It will be much appreciated by people, and especially at the ADRC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you. Oh, I guess I make a motion that we accept.
I second.
$2,500.
Any other comments or discussion?
I think Randy should read it.
I'd also like to thank you, Randy. Since it's about funds, we will go to the voter board. Ken Fisher.
Thank you.
As the vote, 21 yes. Thank you. Resolution 2019-32, school resource officer positions.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we adopt Resolution 2019-32, and I would certainly hope we do it unanimously.
I second that.
Discussion or?
Sure. So I know the sheriff is here. I asked her to be prepared to do a little presentation if you'd like to hear it. I know it's gone through 3 committees, but not everyone may have seen it, so I guess it's up to you what you would like to do, if you'd like to hear a little presentation or not.
Sure.
I see some, yes, I see head shakes.
Okay.
It came all the way out here.
Yes. Well, it's one of those things that's gone through the committees, and this way it's recorded and people understand what we're doing, so I think we'll do a shortened version, but yes, if you could come up. You have the presentation up? Oh, they're just going to do it. Okay. All right. We're going to do the old-fashioned, this top PowerPoint.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I asked Ms. Nordine to join me today. It's really been, this whole thing has really been a joint effort. As Ken said, I spoke to, I think, everybody in the county for the last month and a half regarding this. For me, I'd like to stand in front of you as the sheriff and say this is something that isn't needed, but unfortunately, that is not the world that we live in today. Again, it was a collaborative approach with the district attorney's office, human services, county providers, all the different school districts. And we've really been working hard to figure out what's that missing piece, can we do something different? And again, taking that collaborative approach, most of the schools took advantage of the safety grants that were last year by the Department of Justice. And this is really the last piece, is who's going to end up monitoring the schools. The school staff, the personnel, they just don't have the time to do it, and honestly, or the expertise to do it. So from my perspective, I'm asking you to consider allowing us to add these 3 positions. I understand and respect our process for hiring personnel and the timeline. Just a background why I'm here today is when we began the conversations, the schools really wanted to see if we could get that done for the 2019-20 school year. So that is why I'm here today versus under the normal process. Really, we designed it so the patrol officers currently that go into the schools, they do not have the unique training. I have 22 patrol officers, and to train each of those individually with the youth training that's recommended was just cost prohibitive. So We ended up building a job description, which is in your packet. We used the best standard, the National Association of School Resource Officers. They used the best practice program, and that's what we would be following. All 3 administrators back what we're trying to do, along with the people that work in the district. Again, I wish I didn't have to stand in front of you and tell you that this is where we are today, but this is where we are. And there was an organizational change in our department by Sheriff DeLarwell, where we used to have 5 investigators, and now we're down to 4. So many of you are aware of Officer Neville being in the schools. He actually needs to be an investigator and focus fully on investigations. So looking at the organizational structure, that's why we went with the 3 resource officers. Again, it's been a very collaborative approach. I know there are individuals that do not think that a school resource officer is effective. I've researched this for the last 5 years. I've got probably hundreds and hundreds of hours of articles that I've read. And really, when it comes to data, it depends on what data you're looking at. And I think, if you're for school resource officers, you're probably going to find the data that helps you get there. If you're against it, you're probably going to find the data that's there for that. But I think the important thing is there is no data for the things that SROs prevent and for the influences that they have on children making better choices. There is no data there for that because there's no way to quantify that. So I know Ms. Nordine would like to speak just briefly because obviously when we deal with young people at our level, ultimately under certain circumstances, they do reach her level, and I know she would like to speak a little to that.
So, good morning, everybody. As the district attorney, I'm in support of this resolution. There are some concerns that have been brought up just in passing as I've spoken with people about it, that this is an opportunity for the police to get into the schools and, for example, run the canine through all the lockers and try to catch kids doing things bad. And that is absolutely not what this is. This is about having an officer in the school who develops a relationship and a knowledge base of that school's unique environment and culture. At the district attorney level, I work with juvenile referrals, and those can come to me in different ways. The Department of Human Services often makes a recommendation to me in terms of what we should do. Should we be filing a formal petition in court and bring this child through the delinquency system? Should we offer an informal agreement where they just work directly with a social worker, or should nothing be done? And when I have to look at a report from a police officer who entered a school because they were called out for something, and I get a 4-paragraph report trying to tell me what went on, without having some real true knowledge about the culture of that school and what that student might be going through, it's hard for me to make an informed decision. I'm not in the business of trying to bring kids into the courthouse, into the juvenile justice system if we don't need to. And working with the Sturgeon Bay School Resource Officer, I can tell you that she's been able to give me insight into different events and different situations that we've had that has been invaluable in determining how best to proceed. Because what we want is for these officers to develop relationships with kids so that kids can come to them in advance before the problem occurs. It's preventative. It's not intended to be something to go catch kids doing the wrong thing. So I would urge you to consider this and to vote in favor of it. I can tell you from our perspective, I think it's the best thing we can do for the youth right now.
As Ms. Nordine said, the approach is really 95% preventative and 5% law enforcement. So I would be glad to answer any questions. I've opened up the floor for that, or...
Vinnie.
I just have a general one. In reading this, I'm assuming there's time, if we could speak to it a little bit more, that will change any perception students or parents may have of what a police officer stands for versus what you're going for in the school in this relationship building. Is that kind of built into the curriculum or built into the transition of having that officer there regularly?
Correct. If it is approved today, our plan, working with the school districts, is to actually start getting out in the public and talking about what we're going to do in the schools, with both community presentations and parent presentations, and then try to just educate what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're going to get there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Linda.
I just wanted to thank our 3 school superintendents for coming to our meeting this morning. As they indicated, you cannot put a price on safety, whether it be students, staff, visiting parents, whoever's in that facility. When this first came to the Public Safety Committee, it was more or less discussed on an 80/20% divide between the county and the school district. I know that percentages is skewed slightly, and plus we have to throw in a vehicle, but that's fine. And it's also a 3-year contract, so that gives us 3 years' worth, I think, at the end of that contract to evaluate, or even on an annual basis, if we could have a report from the school districts on how this SRO has been a resource to the schools. So I do support it.
Thank you, Linda. To that part of our program, it does include a quarterly review by the supervisor of the SROs with the assigned or designated individual at the school. And then on top of that, I would plan to put that as part of my annual report for the committees.
John?
Having a law enforcement background, I'd like to commend Tammy, Sheriff Sternert, and District Attorney Nordine, and the school representatives for bringing this forward. It's always been a, excuse me, it's always been a struggle in law enforcement to communicate with the children on the streets. This gives us a great opportunity to have a presence, to communicate, to educate, and learn also from this. I think it's a valuable asset both to our community in today's age and climate, and to our children's safety in this age and climate that we're in, and I don't suspect it's going to get easier as time goes on, so I am in support of this.
Bob?
Just to clarify, if it hadn't already been mentioned, I was at the Gibraltar School Board meeting when Sheriff Sternard came and gave a presentation, and it was a unanimous decision by the school board to support this, so I mean, it's supported there too. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. We have a motion and a second. We will go to the voter board. That's passed and a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Thank you, everyone. Resolution 2019-33, amendment to the Door County Administrative Manual and/or Employee Handbook.
Sure, so this actually went through both the Highway Committee and also the Administrative Committee. And the resolution that's before you is we made some adjustments within the, I guess, the staffing and operations within the Highway Department. And what we've also done is, as part of the process, we're looking at adding a foreman position to our paving crew when they're doing those operations during the summer. So it ends up being about 6 months of the year. But when we did the review, I asked our HR director, Kelly Hendy, to go through and do research on our rates to make sure that they're, I guess, accurate or competitive within the market. And we did find that ours was well below what the average is, and there's other counties that actually are higher. They are different. Actually, some actually just have full-time foremen all the time. But in the cases where we did find where they have foreman pay, there was a higher rate that's listed, and we are recommending that it be adjusted up from 50 cents to $1 per hour.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second it.
Other discussion or questions? We will go to the voter board. That's passed and voted 21 yes. Thank you. Resolution 2019-34, Facilities and Parks, transfer of non-budgeted funds. Kathy?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-34, Facilities and Parks, transfer of non-budgeted funds.
Second.
Discussion, explanation? Linda?
Okay, so am I on the right resolution here? What was in our packet has since been amended?
Right.
Correct?
Right, so
So in the
amended by
packet-
what was placed on your desk today.
So what was in the packet, it was coming from museum reserve funds or whatever, capital improvement project fund, whatever. Now it's coming from our unassigned fund balance, be it at several committee meetings and at, I think, at least one board meeting here. We pretty much agreed that we would not be making any major investment in that building until we had a long-term plan. In my mind, $94,000 is a major investment, so.
I can clarify two things. The 2 points that you made, first was where the funds are coming from. That is correct. So our initial recommendation was to take it from, I guess, our museum fund that we had set money aside for the future expansion of the museum. At Finance, they discussed that since we don't have a clear plan and it may not entirely be used for the museum, that it should come under the undesignated fund balance. So that was the recommended change out of Finance. In terms of, I guess the major expenses, again, the $94,000, yes, to me is a significant amount of money, but also too, if I could clarify where that money is being used. So a large part, if you look at one of the whereases, is for, I guess, the heat and gas for the facility itself. And then the other large part of the expense is, as far as we're doing minimal maintenance, what we consider this year, just in terms of improvements to the building, just to get it within, I guess, what I consider a better operating conditions. And then there is one large part that's included within the expenses, and that is as far as the future planning. So that's what drives up part of the price, would be actually bringing on an architect on board, just to have them be able to work with us and determine how we're going to use the building in the future and how we're going to program the building for the future. The one thing that was explained at both facilities and parks and then also at Finance yesterday is that any type of use within the building that's not retail will require us to do what they consider a change in use. And we'll have to look at the code to make sure that whatever use we place in there, for example, even if it is storage for the archives, that we actually have the building that's compliant with all the code. So that expense, we just asked for an estimate, but that expense was $22,000. But again, that's with the firm actually taking you through the entire process of, how do you want to program the building, what improvements need to be done, and initially starting some of those initial concept drawings. So again, I agree with you that it's not a small expense, but I think we're trying to be both cost conscious. The one thing we did explain is anything that's going to be, I guess, larger. For example, we talked about replacement of the roof or other items, whether it's doors or windows, that'd be part of the capital improvement plan. That'd be part of the budget process.
Linda, sorry.
I don't know why we would be hiring a professional engineer when we don't even know what we're going to do with the building. Does the utilities include fiber optic and phone?
Yes.
Okay. And we don't know what we're going to do with the building, so.
Well, again, one of the discussions that we... Nope, no, I understand that, but I guess one of the things that we discussed, and it's already been proposed through the Museum and Archives Committee, is to make that back portion of the building available for the archives.
Right. I remember.
So even with us doing that, we need to work with an engineer to actually do up the drawings related to that and also make sure that the building's compliant. And then likewise, some of the investment in terms of, for example, the fiber, all of our buildings are, I guess, connected by fiber. And right now, we're paying an annual contract for the fire monitoring. So there's a payback period for actually getting the building hooked up, and we'd need fiber there anyways if we're going to actually have the archives in that location, because they have to be part of our network. So
Could we sharpen the pencil a little bit?
I know Wayne did an itemized list, and I know Wayne's here. He can go through some of the stuff, but I don't think we have anything on that list what I would consider unnecessary. I don't know, Wayne, if you want to come up and maybe summarize some of the itemized items.
John?
Are we going to eventually come up with a plan for that building that we can make discussion and decisions on based on some good information? Not that the information we're providing isn't good, it's just a question of doing it hodgepodge versus having an actual plan of attack for this particular piece of property that we haven't really discussed, other than to say we needed it. I'd like to see exactly what other purposes or usefulness this building's going to have for the county.
Correct, and that's, I think that's part of the reason why we included the architectural fee, so that'd be having someone come on that could actually help us program and look at what our potential uses are for the building. And also the facilities and parks had that on the agenda as far as discussing the future use and also possibly looking for even some other public or private partnerships as we, in case we want to grow into the building over time to try to offset some of the expenses, so.
Biz? Well, when we passed the resolution to make an offer to purchase and where that money would come from, I think we were advised, and everyone should have known, that if we were successful in getting this building, that there were some problems. Not that it was a fixer-upper, but there was problems, and we were told about that when Wayne went through and looked at stuff. So this shouldn't be a big surprise, this $94,000, that we're trying to protect that building until we figure out just all the uses that we're going to use. So this was before us, before that the building had problems, and we were putting in this lower offer, and we got the building. So now we have to take care of the roof and the things that Wayne's going to outline. So thank you.
So we ran through these at the Facilities and Parks and then yesterday at the Finance Committee. So the repair and maintenance building cost structure that we came up with, so that's the first $40,000 that you saw in the resolution. So we have some landfill charges that we have to take care of. There's a lot of garbage that was left in that building that we have to get out, and we have to pay for that. So we came up with $800 there. Security lighting, so around the building, there's a lot of lights that are broken. So it's in our best interest as an organization to fix those and make sure that they're working. There's $2,200 that we came up with there. $22,000 for the architect and engineering study. And that's a process that'll help us determine what we're going to use that building for. And so that's public input meetings. That's that process that we went through when we developed the community center. So they'll take us through that process of how we're going to use the building to the best of its ability. It also develops drawings for that building. So that building didn't come with drawings. So we have to have those. So those are the BIM drawings that we could use to move forward in how we move forward in using that building. So that's that initial cost and layout. We have ACM, which is hazardous materials testing, that we must do as an organization. So we have to find out where we have asbestos, where we have lead paint, what kind of ballast we're dealing with in the lighting. So we need those roof asbestos tests done before we can replace the roof. Anything we do in the floors or contracts in the future for contractors and to protect our own employees, we have to do that. So I got cost estimates from AIRS to come in and do up to 50 samples within the building. We're fairly certain it's going to be there, so we have to do the test and identify where it's at. And so that's a hard number of $4,600. So these things add up to that $40,000. The annual sprinkler inspection, $1,300. Annual fire extinguisher inspections, $250. We already changed the locks in the building. That cost $368. So we bought the building, but we had to change the locks. So the keys for that building were the exact same keys as 3rd Avenue. So we had to change the locks in our building so they didn't match the other building on 3rd Avenue. So we take care of our investment. The fire alarm and burglar contract, we had to renew that in the county's name to keep fire protection as required by the city. So there was an annual cost right now of $1,560. And so that's where Ken's talking about, if we put fiber into our building, we can eliminate that cost and monitor our own fire protection system as we do with all of our other structures in the county. We have some facility cleaning and repairs that I don't have budgeted in 2019, so we would need to account for those things that we would have to take care of ourselves, but it's going to cost us something to do that work. And then we have plowing. So next fall, we're going to need to do plowing services on the sidewalks and in the parking lot. So I don't have plowing equipment to do that, so we would most likely add that to our contract with Beeson to take care of the the parking lot for sure. The sidewalks we would do, but we also have to put salt costs in there too, so that's gonna increase some of those costs. So there's a lot of micro details that I've thought about in this budget. So that's that first 40,000. And then the repair and maintenance equipment for the 20,000, that fiber is 10,775. So Jason got a very sharpened pencil number on that to answer your question. So normally that probably would have been 15 to 16,000, but they were on site and they were prepared to do that by the end of last month for us to do it immediately. We had to delay that until we were funded for that number. And it's over 10,000, so it would need to come to county board anyway. HVAC, so we need to make sure we take care of our rooftop units. So we got to clean those and the filters, so there's another $1,200. Lighting supplies is in there. So there's the building part, and then there's the actual supplies that we do to take care of this stuff. Plumbing fixtures, cleaning materials, emergency exit batteries, so we're not on a generator, and it's not LED, so we need to replace all those batteries. Again, to keep the fire chief happy, he's in the back of the room. So they come through the building and they check those, and there's probably $500 or $600 in batteries that we need to replace just in the exit lights in that building. And we have a little bit more HVAC maintenance, and then we're going to replace a water heater in there that we took out of the old senior center because it was only 2 years old, saved it, and replaced that. So we have some supply costs there. So there's no fluff in this number. I want you to be assured that it's very basic of what we're trying to do to maintain the basics. The other CIP items of the storefront windows and doors and fixing the back door, the roof, all of those are large three-figure numbers that would come in the CIP in 2020, 2021 when we figure out the exact uses of the building and through that process. Does that help?
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Dan?
Wayne just briefly touched on it, but basically this is the same way we approached the highway shop, and his crew and that did a fantastic job. Look what we ended up with. And we're going down that, he's going down that same road, so I think you've got to give him confidence on what he's doing there.
Vinny?
I have good confidence and I agree, except for I think that had a mission behind it that people could get behind as far as the senior center and an ADRC. So I think that that's kind of, it's coming and this will help get there, but I think it's good to kind of keep that in mind, what that mission might be, because it'll be easier to support with that for me. Yeah.
John?
I can understand all the costs and that, but maybe I didn't fully understand it when we started down this road, but I'm starting to get a little uneasy feeling of where the financing is coming from on this project. That's the thing that I'm getting an uneasy feeling about. Where was it coming from when we started? Where is it coming from now?
Okay, so the financing, again, what's being proposed now would be under the undesignated fund reserve. But I guess what we had, when we originally brought this up and we talked about, for example, replacing the roof or making other improvements, we do have $480,000 that's in a reserve account that was for the future museum expansion. At that time, the expansion was going to be directly to the building. I think the thought process when we talked through purchasing this building is that that would now take away that requirement to expand the museum, that we'd be somehow leveraging this building. So I would foresee in the future, for example, when we bring forward some of these projects, whether it's the roof or other remodeling thing, that you'd initially tap that 480,000. I'm guessing, depending on which way it goes, there could be some costs that are above that. But again, each year we budget about $1.5 to $2 million in terms of capital improvements, and we always try to stagger the, where that money is going to make sure we're maintaining our assets, but that it would naturally just get built in with our other assets in terms of how we're trying to manage them and move those forward.
Anybody else? Now we'll go to the voter board. I'm sorry. Dave?
It was a background question even yesterday. What items on here have we already paid for? on your list that you gave us. Wayne?
So we have,
Monies that we actually have spended towards the line
yep,
items you talked
so,
about.
so we've expended some landfill charges. The fire contract and
Locks?
change the locks. That's it.
Okay, so then
Those-
the rest of
those-
the items are planned and in the
Yes,
works and
yes.
looking for the money?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've kept it absolutely de minimis, right? The things that I absolutely was required to do, you know, to meet some requirements. Otherwise, I was not going to expense anything without authority.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, back to the voter board.
Sure, now it doesn't want to work. There we go.
And it's passed on the vote of 20 yes, 1 no. Resolution 2019-35, 2018 carry forwards from general fund accounts. Kathy?
Make a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-35, 2018 carry forwards from general fund accounts.
Second.
These are in the process of like grants and whatever that are still, that had not been expended for 2018, and they're being forwarded to 2019.
Questions? Not, we'll go to the voter board.
Great band.
Has passed on a vote of 21 yes.
Thank you.
Resolution 2019-36, appointments to committees, commissions, and boards.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Of course, we are reaffirming our current committees and appointments moving forward for the balance of the next term. Any questions? Not, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Ordinances report, Smith rezoning. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion, we accept the report on the Smith rezoning. Is that Smith or Smythe? I asked him at the meeting, but I forget which it was.
Smith.
It was Smith, okay. They're asking to rezone from 1.43 acre parcel from high-density residential to single-family residential. I don't know if Mariah's back there or not, but as I remember, this is actually a down zoning, what they refer to as down zoning. I think it was, they could have had as many as three buildings on it, but they're only going to have one. And the real reason for the rezoning was there's a, and I think it shows it on the, no, I guess it does not. There's a driveway in there right now, and they wanted to extend the driveway, gravel driveway. They wanted to extend it for parking purposes for when they build their cottage or their home on there. And that was the reason for it, because of the setbacks. If they go to single family 20,000, it lets them have closer, less setbacks from the wetlands.
Yes. Questions? Bob?
Whatever the explanation and whatever the path we got here, what I'm seeing is that we're going from, what is it, a 30-foot setback to a 10?
Yes.
So, I mean, we're infringing on wetlands, and I can't support that. We need to be protecting, giving our wetlands more protection, not less. So whatever the convoluted path of how we got here, and maybe the zoning change, I mean, the bottom line is we're impinging on wetlands more than it's set up right now, and I can't support that.
Linda?
Can I ask what the Town of Bailey's Harbor Town Board, if they provided a recommendation, Mr. Fisher?
That I don't remember. Is Mariah back there?
It's Mariah's there.
Yep, okay.
I'm back here, but I don't remember that either. We didn't, I know there was no opposition. I can't remember whether anybody provided any letter from the town or not. I can tell you in response to Bob's concern, that driveway was put in before there ever was a wetland setback, and they're actually not talking about extending it. They're talking about putting their garage right on top of the gravel that's already there. So it's not actually further encroaching into any wetlands.
Vinnie?
Mariah, isn't it 10 feet for houses in that area already? And the 30 feet was because it was a multi-dwelling occupancy?
Correct, yeah.
So it's not changing what should be, except for that they're changing their zoning to a single-family home instead of a multiple.
Right, that it's part of what used to be a cottage resort, which is slowly, a lot of the cottage resorts are turning more into single-family home properties these days. And there have been several rezonings that have come to the county board in the last handful of years on that same stretch of Kangaroo Lake, with people going from high-density residential to single-family 20,000, which, as Ken said, is actually considered a downzoning in terms of the intensity and density of the uses that can go on that property, because they could put a multifamily building there right now if they wanted to. But all they want to do is put a single-family home with a garage on the existing driveway gravel, which the garage would be too close to the wetland for the high-density district, but not for the single-family 20,000 district. But there's not actually any further fill being proposed, nor is the fill that's there now in what is considered a wetland.
Bob?
Sure, we might not be filling any wetland, but you're putting an impervious surface with a roof 10 feet from the wetland, and that's not okay.
We already actually consider gravel to be an impervious surface, and it's regulated as such.
Well, that could be adjusted, I mean.
Anybody else? Oh, was there a second on that?
No.
I'll second it.
Oh, sorry.
I don't think I heard one.
Okay, by voice vote to accept the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Ordinance 2019-04, Smith rezoning.
Okay, and that, again, I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-4, a mandatory zoning ordinance, I should say, of 2019-04, amendment to the zoning map of Bailey's Harbor concerning the aforesaid property.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion?
Just a comment, the letter from Bailey's Harbor indicated that both the Plan Commission and the Town Board voted 10-0 in favor of it.
Vinnie?
I just have a general comment is, I feel that if that is what is allowed for single-family dwelling everywhere else, we can't say it's not for someone else unless we're going to say they can't have a single dwelling rezoning. I mean, it's kind of a confusing point with the issue of changing a wetland setback. It's set for a multi-occupancy dwelling because there's more impervious surface. And if it's set one way for everyone else, I don't see how we could not do that for one person. So. I don't know if you want to explain that. It's a hard explanation. But.
Bob?
You know, maybe I'm not understanding something, but building close to the wetland is just not okay. That's just my.
I think what Vinnie's point is that all the other single-family homes that are on that stretch that are in the same zoning district get to have a 10-foot setback. Sure. And the reason that larger setback exists is because it anticipated that multifamily complexes are what was going to be going in that zoning district. And they're not putting a multifamily complex. They want to put a single-family home. I don't know if that's any more clear than the way Vinnie said it.
It's hard to explain, but that, yes, it's already.
So yeah, the reason
standard.
for the increased setback for that district is that it anticipated more intense, more dense uses on the property, but that's not what's being proposed for this property.
You're actually, I understand what you're saying, and I agree, but you're actually being less intrusive of the wetlands by having a single-family home there as opposed to multiple units.
Maybe. It depends on the square footage.
Okay. So, you're dealing with more people. So now you're dealing with fewer people in that same small 1.43. So
Anybody else? Oh, Kathy? Yes. Yes.
Dan,
Daniel.
Daniel, get out of your chair and push it in. I know, but get out of your chair and push it in. Push it in. Just
we'll
push
yell
it
at
in.
Chivalry isn't totally dead yet.
It took him a while.
Had to be in the front row, didn't I? What's that, David?
Thank you.
Drinking that Pepsi.
Okay, we have an ordinance, so we'll be going to the voter board.
You will need the rezoning.
Yes.
What are we voting for again? Oh,
I didn't know I was that fast.
Let us pass on a vote of 20 yes, 1 no. Thank you.
Come on. That's just what we talked about this morning.
Cana Island update.
Sure, so maybe Wayne, you want to come up to the front so they can, but we can kind of just give you a summary. What we'd like to be able to do is just kind of give you an update on the project. It's gone through some of the committees, but again, there's been some comments that the full county board would like to be apprised of projects as they're moving forward. So when it went through facilities and parks, we just wanted to bring it forward, and actually we brought also the finance, but we wanted to bring it forward just so the full county board is aware of what we're doing on the project and just kind of the current status. So I don't know if maybe Wayne could cover it and I can be the backup.
Sure. So I provided a memo to the county board chairman. There's nothing on the screen to look at. You need to just look at me.
I'll hold it up.
Well, yeah, it's in your packet. So essentially, I'll kind of go through the memo, and then if you have questions, I'm sure you will, and that's good. So we went out for an initial bid. Actually, I'll stop and go right back to the beginning because Laura always has this question. So the initial budget for the construction was established by Emil in October at $450,000. That's the construction budget. Okay, that doesn't involve the architectural engineering fees or any of the fees that we would have by heirs or any of the other miscellaneous fees that we have on all of our projects. Okay, so when we came back with the first initial bid, it came back at $687,000. Okay, so way over budget on a essentially 2,000 square foot building on the island, right? That's the interpretive center. And then we have a 400 square foot building, which is a garage, not heated, not lighted, one garage door and one service door. Pretty simple structure, right? So there's a pretty big disparity of what's going on there. So at Facilities and Parks meeting, we accepted the bids that came in, and then the committee decided to let staff, myself, Emil, which was Paul Martzke, who was the construction manager for this project, and the architect, David Mayo, for the project, go through the bids and identify which bids were consistent, basically with the market standards that we would accept, and then which bids we would not take, and we would go back and rewrite the scope of the projects based on value engineering. And so those are the ones that I outlined in the memo for you. So the architectural woodwork, carpentry, metal roofing and siding, aluminum entrances, storefront glazing, the HVAC package, and electrical. Those 6 were rewritten and redesigned by the architect and Emil together, and then we rebid those 6 items, which are due on Thursday, the 18th. So the goal, which is also in the memo, is to reduce our construction cost by up to $170,000 to get us back inside of our projected budget to make the project whole. One of the things to keep in mind on page 2 of that memo, last fall, the Maritime Museum made a deposit based on their 2018 income to the island. We have available to the project yet in the Cana Island Reserve $156,000 that we have not tapped into or authorized for use for this construction project through the county board that is available for the project. So to date, we could potentially have up to $746,000 for the project, but we don't want to do that. It would just reduce our payback. Remember when I talked to you about the payback and we had that discussion last fall on how we're going to pay back the project when we did the resolution for the 365 and then the additional 150. We had a timeline of how we wanted to pay that back. By not using that money, we'd pay it back quicker. But if we use some of that, it would just delay that payback time. It would ultimately be paid back with that no-cost loan, but it would just take a little bit longer. So essentially, that's where the project's at. It's out for its second rebid. We did send letters of intent to all of the packages that we've accepted because we had a 60-day window that we needed to get to those bidders. Otherwise, those bids would have closed. We'd had to rebid all those as well. So we have a letter of intent out to them. So if these come back favorable on Thursday with review from Emil, we'll bring those back to the Facilities and Parks and be able to make a recommendation to keep moving forward with the project.
Questions?
Awesome.
Amazing.
That was better than yesterday.
Yesterday, you got them all.
Well, because I had good questions yesterday and I was able to answer them.
Laura.
That's good.
Great question.
Yeah.
Dave?
David, sorry.
I guess I perhaps led quite a bit of the discussion yesterday on whether we're rebidding portions of the bid or the entire bid, and that's debatable which way to go. I respect the decision. I guess the one item, as we were talking about the Younker's building just previously, about how much we're spending there, here we have an estimate of $450,000, and we're told Emil, didn't account for it being on Cana Island, and the cost is going to be so much higher. And so we arrive at a number of $590,000 in the budget. But now we're saying, well, gee, if we're way over that, we've got another $156 available. I don't like to go down that road. I really think we have to stay within a budget, and if not, we have to start over with bidding. So that's just a thought on it.
I don't want to debate that. We knew that we had some coming in from the 18. We could not project very accurately what that would be from the Maritime Museum. And Kevin knew it would be large. We just didn't know how large it would be, so we didn't want to count that as part of this project. So we tried to do it without it.
Sure.
To increase our payback quicker, to ourselves. So we tried to be frugal in that manner. But I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
2019 Department Annual Reports. Those are in your reports and miscellaneous folder on the county website. I'm sure you're probably through at least half of them by now. New business, none. Oral committee reports. Anybody want to have an oral committee report? Review the committee minutes. Review of vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements. The next regular county board meeting will be May 28th at 9 a.m. DCECD is next week, April 24th at Stone Harbor. Has anybody changed their mind, said they were going to go, and is not now going to go?
What time is it again?
Good time?
No.
Why don't you just say that, Joe? Yeah, instead of.
Anybody that told me no, changed their mind and want to go. Okay.
I'm on your list,
What,
right?
What
Nissa
time is
wants
it
to know
again?
what time it is. The meal is at noon?
Noon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, lunch, yeah.
Pretty crowded.
I probably have,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going. I think I told you yes.
I think I told you yes, too. It's hard to remember.
The WCA Annual Fall Conference is September 22nd through the 24th in Wisconsin Dells.
What's that one?
Okay, so I'm being told the reservations are May 1st, so we would like a hand count of who now knows that they are not going to go.
What was the date again?
24th.
September 22nd through the 24th.
Okay, thank
So
you.
if you're not going to go, you know that already, hands.
Been there, done
I got a question.
Sure.
If I go there, would I be kind of thought that I should attend the conferences and the meetings, or could I just go off on my own and do what I want?
There you go.
No
I'm
water
asking a
park.
question.
What's new?
Well, I would certainly hope that every county board supervisor would understand the intent would be to actually attend the conferences and the meetings that took place.
But attendance
Thank
is
you.
not taken.
Just like the highway committee does when they go.
They don't go.
Yeah, the intent and the reality are.
Okay. The,
Can I make a-
sure, go ahead.
This other part of the announcement, obviously with the retreat, so yes, you do have the annual reports. If you'd like to review those, I think it gives you some good context of what all of our departments are doing. Also included as homework, just because I know you guys love homework, I included a folder that's put together by Lori, but it has, I guess, 3 items just for your review. It has both this an article on this building trust and communication. Another one, it gives you an update of all of our activity related from the 2017 retreat and our progress made to date. And then obviously the one is also included from the 2009. There was a process we went through as far as identifying, I guess, priorities in terms of operations that we still think is pretty accurate. So if you want to take a glance at that, that might be helpful in context before the retreat. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, the time of the retreat, I had written down in my book 8, but I'm seeing now it's 8:30. Which time is correct?
So we will officially start at 8:30, but you can get there early if you'd like to do some coffee for that. But we're going to officially start at 8:30, and we're scheduled to go to 2 o'clock.
Okay, real good. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, if there's no further business to
There
be
is.
transacted,
There is another.
There is?
Yes, there most certainly is.
oh, well,
The per diem code for today is 416.
that wasn't on here.
And I got a quick,
What
I got
did
a
you say
quick
it was,
question.
416?
Yes.
Yes.
416.
Bob?
416. Now, would-
I have a quick question.
Adjourn.
Second.
Wait a minute, we still have questions from the floor. Go ahead,
Regarding the
Bob.
department reports, I don't know if I'm halfway through, but I've definitely been reading through them. Just for a future, maybe suggestion or possibility, I mean, I don't want to try to micromanage how a department, summarizes what they do, but just as far as the totals, as far as some of them tell us what the levy limit, or, what the levy appropriation is and budgeted revenue, and some of them don't seem to. So just for future, if there's any way that there's maybe that little aspect that could be maybe made uniform across the departments, that will help us, get that, especially the levy appropriation. But those budget numbers would be nice to see if they were, clear, more clear. Thank you.
Love that idea. Good, definitely.
now I'll make that motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Austin jumps in on me.
They did already.
All in favor?
I don't need all that.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Just adjourn.